Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining the presentation here at RSAC Conference 2021. Today, I'm going to talk about security policy management and hybrid cloud. Um, I'm Sattwik Gavli. I'm a Director of Cloud Product Management here at Tufin. Been helping customers with their cloud migration journey, cloud adoption journey for the last decade and a half, and right now helping them understand what's the need and value for security policy management in cloud to help solve some of their security challenges. Um, Today, I wanted to start with, what are the business goals or of a cloud strategy that, customers are actually looking for? We've gone past the whole discussion about, cost, saving cost and, some other things. But I think at the end of it, if in 2021, you're going to ask anyone, any enterprise exec, why they are trying to move into a cloud or adopt or invest more and more in a cloud strategy, it's predominantly for these three reasons, right? Competitive advantage. Make sure that you have rapid innovation, your time to market is quicker. You want to make sure that you focus a lot more on customers and helping customers, resolve their problems faster, help them troubleshoot their issues, and increase your satisfaction as well as get more loyalty out of them. And then, obviously, more importantly, to capture the market demands. All right, all kinds of issues in past on-prem and non-cloud environments we've seen across last 20 plus years is anything in terms of the customer usage fluctuations, be it anything from seasonality changes in terms of the usage and traffic. One of the most important advantages of cloud is having the ability to elastically grow as well. While that being the goal for a cloud strategy and the investments enterprises are making, the problem arises that the customers also want to implement and make sure that their cloud deployments are secure, but not at the cost of agility, right? So the main goal is to keep or maintain or increase agility, but at the same time, they don't want to impact the security or vice versa. Unfortunately, customers that we've been speaking to or we see on a daily basis do struggle with that, do struggle to achieve that. And the reason being, a lot of times they are depending on a lot of the tactical or the legacy practices that they used to, which used to be on-prem. A lot of reasons why customers have been unsuccessful in maintaining security and agility and end up choosing one over the other, depending on the organization, is because they have not found the right way of making sure that they embrace the newer technologies and go beyond the tactical legacy solutions. And obviously, the other problem is that when you talk about cloud, it's spread out, it's fragmented, there's so much disparity. It's very hard to keep a good sense of what's happening where, who's talking to whom, what is connected to what. So if you look at some stats, obviously on the left side, we see, while no surprises, 81%, very high cloud adoption, in terms of the enterprises. But at the same time, on the bottom left, you see 72% have, security challenges or concerns about the security in cloud. Now, that's something which is concerning, right? When you're growing and adopting cloud at such a high speed, but at the same time, security becomes such a major issue. You know that there is a problem that we need to solve and need to start embracing newer ways to solve the problem. If you look at the right corner, top 5, right? 4 out of the top 5 are challenges in cloud adoption are related to security, be it anything from having the security or governance or compliance concerns, all the way to even having the right security skill sets to help with that. Now, all these things are actually creating issues in terms of creating challenges for the customers and increasing the risk in the cloud environments. So if we look at misconfigurations as being a very common issue in cloud, which are causing cloud security breaches in past, or majority of the cloud security breaches we've had over the last few years have been the reasons for that has been misconfigurations. And again, there are obviously a lot more than these 4 reasons why misconfigurations could occur. However, I chose these top 4 that I see almost on a daily basis on a very regular discussions with customers as to why they have had misconfigurations, or they've come out with some root cause analysis, which have been a combination of these, 1 or 2 of these. So starting with anything from human error, right? Now, human error could be, by mistake, or someone who's actually been notoriously doing it as a rogue employee. However, if we remove the need for humans to make certain actions in cloud, that itself would be helpful, right? And we got to leverage the automation you get with cloud. So there are a lot of different actions in cloud, which by default, by the nature of cloud, are automated. However, not a lot of organizations are all adopting to it. Something as simple as, not manually entering or storing keys is a good example. So the other example would be not manually needing to configure certain things or apply certain policies. You can obviously have automation when it comes to applying policies in cloud as well. That's one example. The other one is lack of visibility. Again, it goes back to the normal saying, you cannot secure what you cannot view. Very, very often we have 2 sets of customers. One we speak to would say, or 2 teams within the same customer base who would say, okay, I am on the on-prem side and I have no idea once my assets are out into the cloud, I have no idea. I have no visibility into what's happening inside there. The other piece, the other side of the teams are the security team sometimes, who are like, okay, we are used to managing certain security groups on-prem, but we have no idea right now, once it's behind a native firewall, what's happening. We don't even know if it's complying with our industry as well as our company policies. So that's another reason, without having the visibility, people end up creating misconfigurations and hence being more susceptible to attacks. The other reasons is, if we think about the way cloud has evolved, customers have had different teams within a bigger organization who have started, building their own cloud adoption or cloud journey or migration journey. There've been different app teams who've decided that, okay, we're going to adopt cloud and this is how we're going to adopt it. So someone could be literally a lift and shift, someone who some teams have refactored or re-architected it to fit in a cloud environment. Someone's gone down the path of containerization and using Kubernetes. All of them are so fragmented in a hybrid cloud that the reason or the ability to make sure that there's a standard or comprehensive security policy that gets implemented, or all these different teams, even though their path to cloud is different, are they all using or adhering to the same corporate security policies from one place or one management system, is something that's not happening very regularly. And that's, again, big reasons for misconfiguration. And the fourth one being, the lack of skill set. I think this could be temporary, right? Today, we don't have enough cloud experts, and within cloud experts, we don't have enough security cloud experts. Maybe 10 years from now, we may not have the problem, right? People are educating themselves. People are trying to learn more and more on cloud and cloud security. We might have enough experts, and the skill set gap would actually reduce in probably next 10 years or so. But today we have that problem. Today, that has been a major problem. And again, not having the right skill set means you're definitely vulnerable to making mistakes, which could be then correlated to any of the other 3 that we talked about, from human errors to not using all the native controls, to not having the right visibility, to not understanding the right approach to take when it's you're part of a fragmented network. I'm using these next set of slides just to give an example of how the lack of visibility and control is what's been a big issue that we've seen very commonly with our customers. I do feel that this is something that keeps coming up very often So I thought this is a use case I need to definitely discuss to kind of show, how it's affecting people and how it can be solved. Again, this is an example of a hybrid cloud application in our customer's environment, and we've tried to, simplify it to the nth degree to carry our point forward. But if you think about it, a hybrid cloud application is where you have different application components in your particular application, which are going to reside on-prem, and then rest of them are going to reside in cloud. Now, if you think about it, the security or the ownership of the environments in on-prem and cloud are different, right? There are two different teams managing it. So if you look at the team that manages security on-prem, they're used to the firewalls and they're used to the next generation firewall, which is extending into the cloud. So while they have understanding or control about all these firewall and the policies on this firewall, the security groups and NSGs, the network groups that are in the next gen firewall, that's all great. But what beyond that? There is a lack of visibility in there. They have no understanding of what's happening beyond that. And that's where they feel that, they have lack of visibility and hence control, and hence feel that, they don't have the end-to-end information to help them keep that connectivity secure. On the other side, of course, the cloud teams, they have limited visibility of only the cloud environments. And in most cases, it's also only a very specific piece of the cloud environment that they own. In fact, even some other environments within cloud, or let's say if it's in a different cloud completely, even the cloud teams themselves don't have all that visibility or enough information to feel confident about securing this. So I think this is, again, very common of why enterprises are struggling, and how it makes sense to have a centralized security policy manager of sorts, which kind of can learn and understand information and see the security policies across on-prem and cloud. And within cloud, it could be your entire cloud. It could be your multiple clouds that you have as your enterprise. It could be Kubernetes. So a security policy management system, which can actually give you all the information, is something that would help in scenarios like this. Now, let's talk about another scenario within cloud that we're seeing a lot of companies do. And then, we understand why we have a lot of enterprises are doing that. There's a reason, is a lot of enterprises are thinking that, okay, I'm used to this. On-prem, I used to just put a firewall right in front of my network, and that firewall was all I needed to manage. All the policies I managed on the firewall were good enough. And once I did that, I was able to get all the, the confidence of, securing and implementing policies for my security for the environment. And that's what they're also continuing to do when you put your assets in a particular cloud. But it's not enough, right? You need, while that north-south traffic information and the security policies there are important, that's great, but you definitely need to understand a lot more of what's happening inside your cloud. So think about the east-west traffic, east-west communication. What's happening, who's talking to whom, what is talking to what within your cloud. That is very much important, right? If you think about it, there's so many other things like your database, your S3 buckets, kind of your different policies within the particular intra VPC. It again goes back to the whole argument about inter VPC versus intra VPC. You definitely need the visibility from both sides to have enough information, enough context to then make your decisions, and obviously feel more confident about how your security posture is. I think this is another very common scenario we keep seeing. And as I said, it's an easier fix sometimes to just slap a firewall in front of your every VPC, but it's definitely not a scalable approach, and it's definitely not enough. You want to definitely get more information within cloud, as there are much more complexities. Talking about complexities, right? If you think about it, cloud is just, the whole adoption to cloud is just bigger. right? When I say just begin, it's relatively, right? It's not more than 10 years old. If we look at a lot of larger enterprises, it's only within the last 10 years that companies have started migrating. And of course, over the last 5 years, it's been much higher. The rate has been much higher. And the last 2 years, the rate has been even higher. But if you think about it, it's fairly new. It's only going to get more and more complex from here on. The whole aspect of using network for your security, or using network policies or network security policies for securing your network or your cloud environments is not going to be enough, right? As time passes, more enhancements in this field, or the technology of cloud evolves, the more standardizations that happen, you're going to require a lot more tools to manage your cloud in the right and the cleaner fashion. What does that mean? Is now you're going to inherit a lot of information, a lot of different components within your cloud, which you would then also need to make part of your security posture. So some examples are obviously the identity, right? So the IAM policies have become really important. So when you think of securing a particular data in your cloud environment, you need more than just the network security, right? You need everything from IAM policies. You need to make sure there's API securities and API gateways. Think about managing those once you start using things like service mesh, right? You're using a service mesh because that's the right way of doing it. That's the best practice. But then how are you making sure that all of these different aspects or components that you're using to manage your cloud are also adhering to the right security policies? Now, one way of doing it is every time you build something, every time an application gets built, you start going and checking with each of these components individually, and then try to make sure there's a good correlation. Or you could have a centralized security policy management tool, which can help you, address all of these. So it's more of a manager of a manager, where it's got all the security policies that your company wants you to adhere to, that your security team wants you to adhere to. And all you need to do is make sure that you are in sync with the security policy management tool every time you're building a new application. As long as you meet all the security policies, as long as the tool tells you that you're not violating any particular policies, you're good. That's the right way of going about it. And that's the right way that you'll only be able to scale as the complexities in cloud goes ahead, right? The other point I want to make on this is, multi-cloud versus hybrid cloud. A lot of companies, again, this is so common, is, the companies say that we started with just having one cloud provider. We decided that we're only going to use one cloud environment, and that's it. We're going to use the cloud provider for all our cloud needs. And guess what happens? You're a large enterprise, you're going to have some kind of acquisitions, and then you inherit another type of cloud that you were not planning to work. So any enterprise which is going to have enough multi-cloud is absolutely going to happen. So, it's hard for you to shy away from that. In terms of hybrid cloud, even if it's only 10% of your assets, even if it's 5%, there's going to be a while before a large enterprise becomes 100% cloud. Until then, this complexity of hybrid cloud environments is going to persist. So that is going to stay with you as well for a while. And dealing with the complexities as you interact, as you migrate some of your workloads from your on-prem into the cloud is something that's going to be very important. And obviously, right, no one here has ever heard this, right? No one's ever heard the fact that, don't disrupt my developer productivity at the cost of security. No one, right? Because we all know that, we are completely okay to, impact or become bottlenecks when it comes to security at the cost of, going to market pretty late. So obviously not. Like we started, the business goals for cloud strategy is agility and making sure we go to market sooner. So security cannot become bottleneck. And hence, there are ways in which you want to make sure that you help the application developers in meeting their goals of timelines and going to market quick. So how do we go about this, right? So we've talked about some of the things about, having a centralized security policy management will help. There also is the whole talk about how you want to make sure that there's enough collaboration between different teams within your environment. So we've talked about, we've seen things like developer and companies who've seen that, look, security is a shared model, right? It was very well defined over the last few years that when it comes to security, unlike on-prem where the security team was in charge, the enterprise is responsible for their own security. Then things change once you move into cloud. Obviously, we learned that it's a shared security model where it's shared between the cloud provider as well as the enterprise, right? Your organization, and it could be the security team. Now, I think the same applies even within an organization. So even within the organization, like security team used to be the only team which was, predominantly responsible for security. That's changed. When you have adopted cloud and you've adopted things like DevOps, cloud operations, CI/CD, you have to make sure that dev teams, app owners, application developers, cloud operations, and security all work together in collaboration when it comes to security. So if you think about it, the developers, the cloud operations, and security guys, they need to work together for security. The challenge ends up being when developers and cloud ops, they're not really incentivized for security. They're incentivized for agility. When that happens, now your priorities and incentives are not, tied together. You have to make sure that you have certain ways to help that collaboration. So we talk a lot about shift left, right? So that security does not become a bottleneck in a CI/CD pipeline. Security becomes, or we start security very early in the cycle from a developer perspective. So security is being part of your app building development since the beginning. While that is a great idea, and in theory, that's how it should work, not a lot of tools out there today are helping with that, right? Not a lot of customers are able to understand how to adopt different technologies out there to actually help implement a real shift left solution or approach. I think some of the ways you can do that is making sure that there's an automation of developers always having access automatically to the latest and greatest security policies that have been created by security teams. What that means is, while development is building applications, security is also constantly improving and fine-tuning their security policies. If there is a repository or there is a central location where not only the developers can constantly check if they are looking at or they are complying with the most up-to-date security policies, but also if the tool can constantly check every time the development team or application is adding code for new connections, if it is in compliance or not with the latest security policies out there, that would help you really bring up a problem or alert the users with the violations that this code is being or is about to create much early in the cycle. So the dev actually gets alerted and knows that, hey, this connection I'm making in my dev environment is actually not compliant with my security policies, which are the latest security policies. Now you have real collaboration. Now you don't not only let the dev guys really know at the very early scenario that there is something wrong with the implementation they're trying to do, but more importantly, it is also keeping them up, the security guys convinced that the development guys are looking at it at the earliest cycle. I think that's really important in terms of helping implement something like a shift left strategy here. Again, if it's coming from a centralized security policy management tool, what it helps is it provides you enough information with all the context you need across your network. So a lot of times you can avoid false positives if you see that, okay, there is certain connection outside the environment, and it's not always bad because contextually I know and have visibility for the entire hybrid environment. So I can tell you that while it has connection to something outside, it's still within the environment still makes sense, or within the across the entire enterprise, it still makes sense and it does not violate the security. Now, this is again something possible if you have one security policy management looking at your entire hybrid environment. So we've talked about, having a security policy management, having a centralized security policy management across your cloud and hybrid cloud environment. But if you have to sum it up, right, the way you I would look at it is it helps you, accelerate digital transformation. The whole point is you're trying to adopt cloud as soon as possible so you can reap the benefits of cloud. But a lot of times, as we saw even in the initial stats, it's because of the security challenges. It's because not having visibility, you end up, getting slowed down, and the adoption also gets impacted. Having an ability which gives you enough visibility, having a tool which gives you enough information to continue and obviously add automation helps you adopt your cloud much quicker. The second part I would say is economics, right? At the end of it, while economics is probably not the main reasons for going into cloud in today's world, you need to understand that cloud is here to stay and it's only here to grow. So you want to make sure whatever you architect, however you architect your cloud today and for future, is something that can scale. Because right now, the growth is exponential when it comes to the amount of workloads people are putting inside the cloud or moving into the cloud. What that means is you want to make sure you design a particular architecture with a certain policy, which is much more scalable and does not really increase your cost or compute costs, resource costs exponentially as well. So things like not adding firewall to every VPC out there, using as much as native controls, not adding new agents or sidecars onto every cluster, every node, every pod out there is very important, right? Then most importantly, having a very vendor neutral approach. You've got to have a vendor neutral strategy when you're building your cloud strategy. Again, something like a security policy management tool helps you with that. The way it helps you with that is, as a security policy management tool for your entire cloud network, you can have as many different types of components, right from network layer all the way to things like a service mesh, to API gateways, to using different types of IAM policies providers. You can have different types of components, but you're not dependent on each of them to actually help you maintain your security. You're leveraging as much of your native controls that your cloud provider is providing you, and the security policy management tool you're using, if it's a vendor neutral tool, what it would do is it will make sure that it works with anything as and when you adopt new technology. So it gives you that ability to adopt any new technology, and be it your cloud provider or it could be any of your technology vendors that you work with. So in terms of takeaway, I think the most important point here is I would like to make is, if you are in a hybrid cloud strategy, which majority of the enterprises are, if you have a multi-cloud as well, which again, majority of your enterprises are, you need to have a security policy management for that. So this is where you're going to actually ensure or have the confidence that all your security policies are adhered to. There is one place for every application owner in a fragmented network to actually look at and actually make sure that they comply with. Helps you with meeting your governance and compliance that your companies need to make. The second piece is visibility is very important. And as we discussed, firewall, inter VPC, beyond your firewall is very important. It's very important to understand that it's the east-west connections which have been the major reasons or major modes of actual breaches that have happened over the past few years. So not having enough visibility for the east-west communications beyond your firewalls has been a big reason for different breaches across larger enterprises. So having that visibility is very important. And using your cloud native controls as much as possible is only going to help you stick to best practices, have a cleaner security posture, because the cloud providers are investing a lot in making sure that they give you the best practice tools and abilities. So using native controls help you stay on top of any of the security breaches that you can that can come out there, and make sure that you're on top of it, and your security posture is maintained. So I would leave you with that. I As I've been answering some of the questions earlier throughout, I would encourage, if you have even more questions, I would love to answer them even now. But thank you so much for joining the presentation. Happy to be here and talk to and discuss security policy management with you. Again, feel free to contact us if you have any more, if you need any more information. Thank you.